Hey, welcome everyone to the expert talk here about testing and test automation and autonomous testing, by the way, that's newly added to the title. And this time we do have Leonardo Lanni in the call. Hey, happy to have you in the call, Leonardo.
So happy to be here, Tobias, and thanks a lot for the opportunity.
So, Leonardo, one of your additional learnings is this shift left thing that you should start testing as soon as possible. And
Mm-hmm.
there's something you hear from everyone actually, but the thing is, what is as soon as possible specifically for you?
Yeah, it's a very good thing actually. This is really a mantra for me. So as soon as possible, it's as simple as whenever you have any deliverable, whenever you have a piece of code, start testing it. Really, it sounds super simple, but it's as simple as it sounds. Why? Because if you don't do that, so basically you would increase the technical debt, which is a possibility that in that piece of code that for whatever the reason you say, I'm not testing this right now, I'm too busy, I got other priors, other things to do. There could be, some problems, some issues, some code smell, some bug, you just name it. And then you're gonna build stuff on top of these initial modules. So if you don't spend time already testing that, the risk is that you're building like it's like the foundation of a skyscraper, and the foundation has got a big crack. You don't realize you got a crack, and you start building on top other stuff until it would spectacularly collapse at some point, which is exactly what we don't want, because the at some point it means towards the right, so towards production, towards the client, in a way that we can't forecast, because we are missing this assessment, this validation of the initial part. So I'm a little bit dramatizing here for a good reason. So just to mean, as soon as you have anything ready, start testing. Sometimes, we think, oh my goodness, testing has to be end to end or complicated stuff. No, as simple as write a unit test, play with the definition of done. So make sure that in your team, a piece of code is not just delivering the functionality, but also including the test for that functionality, so that we prove that we bring some value, but we also make sure that this value really works according to the acceptance criteria. So it's nothing really, it's not rocket science, it's something very simple. But I promise that if you start to have this mindset, you're going to anticipate a lot of problems, you're going to find bugs earlier, and that means that basically you can fix them earlier, and you can keep the cost lower, rather than finding, you're in the top of the skyscrapers, and then you, oh my goodness, you realize that there is a broken pipe at the foundation level, and then you have to go all the way down and fix something when you have already built a lot of things on top. So I always try to explain this in a sort of a metaphorical way, using very cheap metaphors like construction sites may help. But I hope you really companies really get what shift left means in testing.
That's something that I hear actually quite often is that the unit testing thing. Now, coming from an end-to-end background, I do have a myriad of other questions, but for the unit testing, would you go so far that you say do the testing even before you write the code? I mean, that is this test-driven development thing that most of us, yeah, exactly, TDT, that most of us proclaimed like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. What is your stance on that?
Well, I think TDD is absolutely a great methodology. You need some, a mindset to do that, because I mean, otherwise everybody would just simply do it. So you really need, to have your developers into the mindset that, hey, let's frame whatever we're building with something that tells us if it's working or not. And let's start with the fact that first we have the test, but then we have not yet the implementation. And now let's put the effort into building the code that makes the test pass. And then once you have this as the foundation, of course, we can do refactoring, we can improve the way we're building the code, and so on and so forth. So I think TDD is absolutely a great methodology, and it does foster shift left testing, because as part of the this methodology, you need to write test cases even before you have the code. So can't be more left than this, actually, unless you go into the specifications and something more like abstract. But yeah, I think it's a very good point, actually.
Okay, and then getting back to the end-to-end testing where I'm coming from actually, because I
Hmm.
mean I never managed to do TDD in a let's say in a useful way. So I shifted to the other end where, where we do end-to-end testing once
Hmm.
everything is in
Hmm.
place. And the question here is more so what is as soon as possible for end-to-end testing? So what do you think is the minimum that needs to exist before you can start useful end-to-end testing?
Yeah, I'm actually I'm like you. I'm really most of my projects I start with the end to end.
Mhm.
Very simple because I am let's say cold in the project when there is already so much stuff that on the other hand you think okay, guys, you built so much without testing. Now we're in a stage where we need to make sure that everything put together works. So well, end to end. I mean it's to be very honest, I may say something that goes a little bit under, let's say, in contrast of what the community does, but it's just my opinion. I think end-to-end testing is beautiful because you can really, build, thinking of Cypress or Playwright or Selenium, you can really see automation testing the solution the way the final clients would do that, which is absolutely beautiful because you can see the entire system working. I really think that is fascinating when you see the system in a high speed manner to be tested by this automation to make sure everything gets checked properly. So for me, end to end is really something that you know. It's something that we should start also doing as soon as there is something that reaches the client level. So this is the meaning of end to end. So um, it doesn't need to be at the very beginning very very complicated scenarios, but at the end of the day we need to make sure that what we're building can be completely used by the client. So for me, for instance, always thinking of so sometimes some people call them nominal test cases. So you know write a scenario where if everything is the system is piloted by the client in the right way, the system will deliver what the client is using the system for. So you don't need to create a lot of validation of very many UI cases on the end-to-end level, because the thing is those test cases are quite slow because they require the system to be spin and working. They require data to be there, and they are slow because they are testing the system from the UI standpoint. So you cross all the layers. But on the other hand, they are the real way to verify that the client will have the real experience. So there's a little bit of a trade-off of deciding what to test, and for sure I love the idea that the end-to-end test cases are helping me, helping boost my confidence that the nominal cases, the value that the application is bringing is being tested and it's working. For sure, I wouldn't go into doing end-to-end to test the validation because a lot of times you spend part of the end-to-end journey into just bringing the system into the status before the testing, and this requires a lot of time and energy. But on the other hand, by checking this on a UI level with the automation, it's really the final proof that the system is working. And you can watch the videos, you can have a real feeling with all those let's say capabilities that you want to have a feeling, is my application smooth, is my application having a fast response time, is the user experience good enough, and so on and so forth. Those are the things that I really think on an end-to-end level you really catch them, and you may miss out instead if you limit your test more like on I don't know, either on the unit level or on the integration level. Great that you do it because you shift left, but don't neglect the end-to-end, the real thing. That's really my mantra, and it's beautiful. It's great testing.
Perfect. And if somebody wants that, cut that out, please cut it out. But I have to do some advertisement. If you are really into end-to-end testing, then check out www.testresults.io. And specifically, if you're into testing, then go and register yourself to be a design customer for user one, because some of the problems that Leonardo just mentioned, like being able to bring the system into a state where you can actually start testing, those are completely solved in user one by virtualizing the whole infrastructure that you're testing on. Nevertheless, back to Leonardo. Um, because you already started to explain a bit from your experience. You said like that is your experience with end-to-end testing, and it might be against what typically is taught as the best testing. You also have this learning more or less, where you say like one of my most important learnings is to keep learning, which is like a meta learning, right?
Yes.
In itself. So and it says like, hey,
Yes.
experiment, find continuous improvement in the work that you do. And when I thought about that, the single question that came up on that is more or less like, can you walk us through your last, let's say, 5 to 7 years on how you continuously improved? So what are your day-to-day or week-to-week routines on continuous improvement, continuous learning?
Yeah, I would say probably for me a very key tool is the fact that as a freelance, I sometimes tend to work on projects which have a lot of common aspects, or even if those projects could be in a completely different type of softwares or systems, but a lot of times there are similarities. So for me, continuous learning is really like trying to find what makes this project similar to a previous one, and this is really an exercise, is me finding the commonalities, and then it's really like, okay, perfect, so this project has this very similar thing with the previous one, and then it would bring me into self-retrospective way to say, okay, great, so how did I sort this problem, how did I manage this project, how did I test this specific case, and what did go good and what didn't. And then I really, sometimes I really write down those things, because I tend to remember them on the spot, but sometimes over time one may, simply forget certain very detailed elements that you only remember as you're in the moment. So my vision is really, okay, last time I had a very similar project, my approach was doing this and that. By doing those three things, I really achieve a lot. I can define some KPIs, or I can really see the numbers, the quality gates, and whatever. On the other end, I just realized that those are the those are the three, four things could have been done better. Simply because when I started the project the last time, I didn't have the experience, and there is a lot of learning. So for me, this time is like, okay, great. Now let's try to do work on this similar project by really considering also the key learning that I have from the previous one, and try to redo the same thing but in a better way. So cut long story short, I really try to find similarities between any current project or projects in the past, learn from how I did it in the past, and if there are some key takeaways of whatever I could have done better, try to do the things better this time. This is something. A very simple example was many years ago. I was working on a e-commerce project where basically the company was using Selenium, and I wrote very big end-to-end test cases, but using the very low-level APIs of Selenium. So finding elements, interacts with elements, and asserting the usual arrange, act, assert, but then in a very, let's say, basic way, because also back in the days my experience was limited. Over time, I had a possibility to work on a very similar project, and then as I was spending a lot of time trying to fine tune the way I would do things, the page object model approach came in my under my radar, and then I really thought, well, this time I'm building the end-to-end automation for a very similar project, but instead of writing those big chunks of code where there is a lot of fragmentation, there is a lot of code that I'm not refactoring, I'm reusing, so this brings really to over time to a project which is not maintainable, which is affected by the very basic problems of a project where you didn't use the sign patterns the proper way. So the next time was, okay, now let me try to, use the POM, the page object model. So let me try to, you know, make sure that every page in this application has got, an UI API that I can use. So, my test case will remain abstract. And every time there are changes in the implementation, all I have to go is just go into the POM and do the changes. And this really, I could really I still remember the difference that working on two very similar projects, but the second time using POM, it made me reach the same test coverage and level that it took me months in the first project. In the second attempt, it took me weeks, simply because I was way more reorganized. I could leverage on the page object model, and I could leverage on a lot on the experience of having done things not in the most optimized ways the first time. So this has become really one of my mantra. Really, never think, the way. Oh, of course, be happy the way you deliver quality, but always be open minded to the fact that, there are so many places on the internet where you can learn and do things better, and they will be great because you're learning, but it will reduce the effort. So either in the same time frame you deliver much more, or you're able to deliver the same project in a less interval of time because you're more efficient and you've been learning so much.
Perfect answer, isn't it? I don't have any. I
Hope so.
I don't have anything to add actually. So you already spoke about Selenium and also a few other tools, and I brought test results here into the game. All of those are more or less like for test automation, right? So you're doing or automation and testing,
Mhm.
however you want to call it. The thing is, what is your stance on test automations? What are the benefits of having it automated? What are the trade-offs? What are the no-goes of test automation? Because uh, sometimes
Mhm.
I hear project managers that say like, I want to have 100% test automation, and I tell them 100% is illusional. That's just not possible. But and there's always this discussion between testing can only be done by humans. It's all exploratory testing, and automated is not testing, but it's checking anyway because it's predefined checks and yada yada and all of that stuff. So, what is your stance on automation testing?
Yeah, it's very simple. So for me, automation is a way to have a fast feedback loop. So we all live in a world of agile, as we were discussing in our initial part of our conversation, where we need to go to the market as fast as possible with something that we have confidence that it's working. So automation is a great way, because if I build a solid automation that I can rely, and this is the most important thing, that I can rely. So when he tells me something is working, I believe it, and I'm like, but maybe, it probably does, but I've always have that feeling. So it has to be built in a way that we as the entire IT team, we believe it. So when it's green, it's telling us that the likelihood things are working is extremely high. So automation is just a way to increase the speed of changing the code, and making sure that whatever we have built already in the past is not being broken by our changes. And this is very, very good, because the automation delivers feedback in a faster way than the human. And also because it's automation, it's script, it doesn't get tired, and the reliability over time doesn't tend to decrease, because it's a computer testing itself. So computers don't get tired. Computers are not emotional. Uh, so far, I would say. So it's a great way to have a very short feedback loop, and to be able in a short time to say we're ready to go live with the next version, or no, the automation is showing something is not right, so we need to see what's going on the other hand. To your point, I really have a lot of fun when managers, because it happens to me all the time, to say, hey, I want everything automated. Well, with the AI, you never know that we will reach also some automation level when the machine is also having some extra feeling about things. But for the moment, my personal opinion is I would never deliver anything on production unless I have spent even a minimum amount of time just using my perception, my senses, doing exploratory testing and making sure that everything is right. Because even if the automation is an amazing tool to automatically checks a lot of things that would take time for the human being, um, at the end of the day, the sensorial perception of our senses is the final, to me, decider whether something is good or not. I had a lot of times in the past. A very simple example to mention is way before I was doing visual regression, I used to trust on things like Selenium, and a couple of times I had the entire CSS completely screwed. So luckily, I always thought it's always good, even if it's just 5 minutes. Let's do some basic exploratory testing manually, me and the team on the most important devices where this application will be running by our clients. And there it's where oh my goodness, the automation is passing because the functionality is there, but the CSS is broken. There is something not right on the UI side. And thank God that we tested that manually, because otherwise we would have released a new version that was crumble, was unusable. And I still believe that doing this is absolutely well spent time, because there is still a gap between what the automation can do and what exploratory testing can still provide, which only we as human beings would be able to appreciate and to say, hey, the automation is green, but there is something not right in this version. It's slower, it's glitchier. Uh, we need to double check that. So never trust whoever wants you to automate everything. It's great to have it, but exploratory testing for the moment is so important for me.
Yeah, that is actually brilliant. I think you just said like the machine or the automation doesn't have emotions, right?
Yeah,
I'm
so
sure.
far.
I'm sure my laptop has emotions. It hates me, definitely. It crashes on me every single day. So it has to me. This one, I guess that's the only laptop, but this laptop has emotions. Actually, pretty sure with that. I even talked to him.
I agree with you. I think those technology, they soak up a lot of our
Yeah,
energy, and they may end up having a soul, because yeah, sometimes you really think they react upon our emotions. So
yeah,
I'm absolutely not thinking that there is nothing like that. And the AI testing, it will definitely bring also some something that would be having automation evaluating also certain things that for the moment we leave to our sensorial perception. I think we're definitely going in that direction.
yeah. It's a love hate relationship all the time, right? Um,
Yeah, I completely agree.
one of the learnings when we are already talking about AI or automation tools, it's on its own. One of the learnings that you had was about picking a tool, or actually the opposite, about not picking a tool, not picking a specific tool, but picking a tool that actually supports your process and not vice versa.
Yeah,
So what does that actually mean? Pick a tool that supports your process. Because most often I
a
see in
lot of
testing
time. Yeah.
that there is no process at all in testing, and that's the thing. So yeah, what is your stance on that?
So this is something I think it applies to testing, but in general to building an application. That we tend to be like all the companies tend to have a very similar stack in terms of supporting processes, like I don't know, Jira, Confluence, and whatever, which they are quite generic tools, so I tend to use them all the time, knowing pros and cons of such tools. For me, the most important thing is, hey, don't pick tools because the mainstream companies are using them, and then try to adapt your methodology so that that tool will work with them. It's more the other way around. Is try to build first a process and then verify if Jira or Confluence or whichever tool you pick would work to support the process, because otherwise you end up really like with amazing tools, but they don't support your methodology, and you pay licenses and you pay prices for things that are you're forcing to use them not in the natural way. So this is something I always think, first define the processes and then find the tools that will help implement such processes. and not the other way around, that you first decide the tools and then you try to build a process around your tools. That some companies make this mistake actually.
Yeah, true. I see that. I actually see it quite often on customer side is that
Yeah,
they actually, I wouldn't say misuse the tool, but use the tool in a way that it wasn't actually coded for, like working around the tool somehow and just using a tool as a data storage, right?
exactly,
And
exactly.
they have an
That's
access
exactly what I mean.
database.
Yes.
Okay, so talking about the tools, how if you are new to a project or if you entering a project new customer side and you are it's up to you to evaluate the tools. So how do you actually
Mhm.
evaluate new tools for test automation, automation and testing? What is your way of thinking, your way of making a decision on which tool you want to choose? Besides, does it work together with my process? Is there anything else that you evaluate tools with?
Well, it really depends on the goals of of the uh, we need to make sure that why are we looking for a tool,
Mhm.
which are our goals, which are our expectations from a tool. And then the typical thing is that, okay, I need a tool that does, I don't know, end-to-end UI testing with visual regression, can be compatible with my CDCI pipeline, can provide amazing test reports that are shareable with the C level, and that provide information in regards to the problem. So we have a quick feedback loop and we can quickly understand if we have any problems and how to fix them, so on and so forth. So it's first defining the expectations of the tool, and then going outside, and it could be based on your previous experience, or it could be simply, sometimes I go on LinkedIn and I see new tools. I'm always open minded to consider new tools, because sometimes tools are built exactly to fix pain points of very common problems that are not yet sorted in the existing tools. And my typical approach would be, if there is time, really to do a proof of concept. So I don't know. You eventually have five tools. You think A, B, and C are probably the best tools, and then you define a time frame and you start using those three tools and compare them. And you need to have like a scorecard. You need to make sure that you evaluate the three tools over all the things that would bring value for you. And clearly, of course, there are also factors like costs, because sometimes at the end of the day you may find an amazing tool, but such tool is 10 times more expensive and you cannot afford it. So sometimes there's also a little bit of a trade-off and compromise in terms of what you need versus what you can afford. And that normally provides a good recommendation, good insights on the next tool to use. And my there's another key factor that I always think it's good to consider. If you ever decide to use a third-party tool, consider a couple of things. Consider the lock-in effect. So if you're gonna rely on this technology, you're gonna pay for the usage of this technology, and this company can really hang you, because they know that you all your test data, all your test reports, they run on their technology. And if they ever decide to increase the price or things like that, you don't really have a lot of options. And also sometimes those companies can unfortunately end up in a bad way, like bankruptcy or whatever. So when using third party tools, also have a little check on the reliability of this company, and on the lock-in effect, because that could have a cost. The lock-in effect, for me, a very simple example is Google Drive. I think most of us, we use Google Drive, and I end up paying for Google Drive because the more space I have, the more I would use it. And at some point, Google Drive is like, sorry, my friend, you have to pay for that. And then I think of the lock-in effect, because I rely on Google Drive so much, and you know I somehow it's granted for me that I will be using that for the rest of my life. And I think but Google really locked me in. And when we're talking about testing tools and things like that, we have to consider that, because it's going to introduce costs for a company.
Definitely, definitely. So we're coming to the end of this expert talk. Actually, it was an amazing discussion
Mhm.
with you, Leonardo. But is there one tip, and that's really important for our viewers and listeners? Is there one tip that you're willing to share today that you've never shared before, and so never in a post on LinkedIn or anything else? Like, some tip that will actually change our life, or like ChatGPT phrases it, a game changer.
To be very honest, I don't know if I have shared that before. Maybe I have, but I can't really remember at this point. But my advice is very simple. It would be try in your free time to build something. So, because I think, the best way to learn how to test things is to learn how to build them, because by building something, you can understand the process that brought from the scratch until, a sort of a final version of a product. So, my advice for testers is really like, if you have the time, start to learn some technology and build your little project. It's something a lot with a lot of fun. Is different than always doing testing, but by building something, you see all the layers they glue onto each other, how things are built, how developers think when they're building things, and that will provide a lot of feedback and a lot of insights and a lot of food for the brain on how you can test things as they're being built. And you do that just for your self learning. So you're not gonna have those typical "don't test your baby" problems. Like, for this reason, we never want developers to test their own thing. In this case, it's something like, to improve your testing skills, try and learn how to build a little software. Can be very, very simple, because it will be so beneficial in learning a lot on how you can test the things by learning how you build the things. So that's my advice. And this is something that I also do it myself. If I ever have time to work on some ideas, it could be, even startup ideas or basic project, I will always do that, because it's a lot of fun and there's a lot of learning.
Love it. A great advice, Leonardo. A great advice. And thanks for being on the Expert Talk. Thank you very much again. And
A pleasure, really, really. Thank you for having me.
and we hope to have you back soon, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Perfect then. Hey, goodbye, Leonardo.
Thanks, Tobias. It was great talking to you. Thank you very much.
Bye.